Okay, we're going to get started. All right. Good morning, everybody. You're listening to the Empowered Marriage podcast, or you could be watching it because it's on YouTube. And so this is podcast 97 of the Empowered Marriage. I'm the host, Helen Harrison, from Power of Change Counselling and Coaching. And today I have a guest. As you know, if you've listened to any previous podcasts, I get quite excited when I have a guest. So this guest is Julie Mason. And I met Julie, it would have to be, I think, 12, 14 years ago. It was quite a long time ago. And I've watched Julie over the years. She's extraordinary in how she does life. I really hold you in high esteem because I've just watched you in business, but also personally and how you show up. And I think you're very authentic. It takes a lot of courage in this world that we live in to be authentic. And recently I've worked with Julie. She has helped me enormously in going deeper in what I want in my career, but also it's really helped me personally on many, many levels. And so I'm going to hand over to you, Julie. I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about you, career-wise and personally. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Helen, and thanks for having me here today. It's an absolute pleasure. Where do we start with who is Julie Mason? Okay, so I'm happily married, 30 years, just this last month. So as at the time of this recording, and I am a mum of fur babies, so I haven't been blessed with children. We'll talk about that another point in the call. And I am a business owner. I teach people how to do LinkedIn easily and elegantly to generate business. I've been in sales for 30 years, but my career has been quite diverse, and I've been told I can sell ice to Eskimos. I pretty much can. But I've worked in reception, in corporate, in all sorts of jobs. And I've got a wide variety of experience, which I think has all layered to become who I am today.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And so we're going to dive in. This is episode 97 and secrets to 30 years of marriage. So the reason I've wanted to interview you, Julie, is, as you know, I do marriage counselling, and when people come and see me, they're not in a good place. And I'm seeing a lot of long-term relationships who are often in crisis and have left it way too long. So if you were to reflect on your 30 years of marriage, my first question would be, when it goes a bit wobbly and you're a bit disconnected, how do you come back from that and reconnect?
That's a good question. And we've gone through patches of that over the 30 years, and some really, hard patches, let me tell you, really hard patches. And it really comes down to deciding how important that relationship is to you. That's the first one, and the commitment that you've made to it. So Greg and I are lifers, essentially. We call it, we've made a lifetime commitment. And so you've really got to come back to, why did you fall in love with them in the first place? Because in the moment when you're in distress, you won't see all of the good things. You'll be seeing all the crap that's coming out. So it's really important to go back and really remember why you fell in love with them and try and find your way back to that. And it comes, most things in life, in my experience, is your own intention, your own mindset. So if you keep thinking, for example, it's all his fault, it's all, he keeps doing this, he's very irritating, yada, 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 then usually it's your view of that. If you change your mindset to see how loving he is in the things that he does, or the words that he speaks, or just try and find the love in that, then that's what you'll see. I think it comes down to that old saying, what you focus on is what you'll attract.
Love it.
Right. And so it's across all things in life, whether it's your marriage, your work that you do, your friends, whatever it is, even what you're seeing on TV, if you're focusing on the negative, that's all that you can see.
Yes.
So you have got to go back and focus on the positive. And if you find yourself in that space where all you're seeing is the negative, my advice and the things that I do is go, okay, I need to start writing a gratitude journal on my husband, or I need to start finding the things that I love about him and focus on that. So that's a really important
thing. It sounds like you have a go-to that if you do get a bit wobbly, because human nature, we can become low vibrationally, we can become a little bit negative, but it sounds like you've got a go-to list. You don't look out at Greg to sort the situation out. You actually look inwardly at yourself, and you've got a go-to list. I mean, I just look around the room behind you. You've got all books and crystals and all things that are really important that fill you up and give you that nurturing. So you give it to yourself first.
Absolutely. The only way to fix something is to fix yourself first. So when you're in crisis, and that it comes back to that old saying, if you want to change the world, change yourself, right? Because that's where it starts.
Yes.
And I think, my journey has taught me that over the 30 years. When Greg and I first got married, I was diagnosed shortly after we started dating. So we started dating when we were 21, and 6 months after we started dating, we broke up. In fact, Greg said, I can't handle you anymore. It's too painful. I can't do this. And I realized in that moment that, damn it, it wasn't his fault. I actually realized that I respected him, and respect was really critical. The word respect over love here is because it was an infant relationship at that stage. 6 months in, we were dating, 21 years old. We had the world at our feet, young, slim, hot, ready to try.
Lusty love.
That's it. But I realized that I respected him, and therefore his words meant that it wasn't me that was crazy. It wasn't everybody else that was crazy. It was me, and I had to fix me first. And so I immediately went and sought for therapy or to get some counseling.
Yes.
And the first counselor that I saw, he did some personality profiles and some sessions with me, and he said, I think you're a little bit beyond my capabilities. I'm going to refer you on. And I went to a Macquarie Street psychiatrist down in Sydney who diagnosed me as borderline bipolar. And the technical term for it is cyclothymic. And you have cycles of hyper, manic episodes, and then followed by depression. And you don't have much control over it. It is a disease. It's not something you can fix yourself by sheer willpower. And let me tell you, I tried that. But you actually do need help. And so I committed to, fixing me.
Yes.
And in that process, I spent 3 years in therapy. Greg and I got back together about 3 months later. And let me tell you, it wasn't smooth sailing.
No.
It was still really rough, but we had enough love for each other and respect for each other at that point that we were willing to work together to get through this. And full credit to Greg in doing that, because I was not easy to handle, let me tell you. I was a hot mess. And so we realized very quickly on, and he came to therapy with me as well to get some advice on being a partner of somebody who was going through this.
Yes.
And we learnt very early on that communication was absolutely key to success in our relationship. And that if I said, you know how people ask you, are you fine? And your husband says, how are you today? And you go, fine. You would know that fine as a trigger word, and he needed to then dig in and ask me a little bit more of what was going on.
Yes.
So he knew that me answering fine was anything but fine. And that was his cue to go, okay, I need to, draw Julie out, essentially.
So
And
what I'm
yeah.
hearing from you is a real strong foundation, particularly that first pillar of respect. So respect for yourself, because you took your time, you took yourself out and did some of your own inner work. So the respect for yourself, but you did it because you could see the respect from Greg and how he was, and you actually valued the connection that you had. So it's anybody listening to this, it's hugely important, that foundation, those first few years. Yes, you got your lusty love in the beginning, but that can quickly quite pop, as you found out, Julie.
Yep.
And then it's looking at yourself,
Yep.
which is what you did. And then you've gone on to
Yeah.
talk about communication. I'm exactly the same. I rattle on all the podcasts about communication.
Yeah.
Because I think it's also, would you agree, it's communication with yourself first. It's understanding yourself intimately so that then you can share that with your partner, and you're not needing or wanting your partner to fix you because you've got it. You've got it within yourself, and you're not looking outside of yourself. So can you speak into that a bit? Because you strike me as someone who's very self-empowered. And if you're a bit wobbly, you will attend to yourself. You will give yourself what you need to bring yourself back in alignment. You do not look outside for your partner to fix you or make you happy or make you better. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's that. So I remember hearing, and I don't know where I heard it, and this is like 25 years ago or something. It's been a long time ago. I don't know whether it was Dr. Phil or whether it was Oprah or who it was on TV, but it was somebody on TV, I'm pretty sure. And they talked about the 3 types of relationships. There was independent, codependent, and interdependent.
Yes.
And independent really means you're standing alone, essentially. Codependent means you're too reliant on the other person, that you can't function without them, which isn't healthy either. Independent in a relationship isn't entirely healthy either, because it means you're not connected.
Yes.
But interdependence is where you can be together and still hold your own identity to some degree, and be yourself, but you are connected in a healthy way. So it's an interdependence that isn't, it isn't an unhealthy. And so that really struck me when I was, in my 20s, as something to strive for in my relationship. And so Greg and I very much are interdependent. We love each other dearly, hence 30 years. In fact, I think we love each other now more than we did when we first got married. But we can have our own separate things going on without feeling jealous or threatened by that or anything else. And with that, we have implicit trust with each other as well. Yeah,
it's beautiful. So if you reflect on your marriage, we all go through cycles of change, and then there's adversity that comes in, because this podcast is very much about change. And so is there something that really jumps out that you can perhaps share with the listeners, an adversity that you've had to overcome and the effects that it's had in your marriage, but how you as an individual and you as a couple were able to overcome it?
Yeah, there was one point in our marriage where we were starting to drift apart. And I remember Greg had said to me that he didn't want to say I love you because he felt that it was becoming a habit. And so he didn't want to say it feeling, and using a word that you use, inauthentic.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to be able to say it authentically. And I found, I am such a loving person.
Yes.
I'm just oodles of love. I mean, you can see behind me, I've got the word love in my office, right?
Yes.
But so love, saying to people that I love them is something that I do a lot. And hearing that back, I think that's one of my, what is it? My love languages.
Yes, words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation,
Yeah.
the love language. And so it was like ripping that out from me when he couldn't say that. And he didn't tell me he loved me for 18 months, which was really massive. And in that process, things started to deteriorate in our relationship. And we, that distrust did come in, and he was working in a particular role that also had a lady around our age he was working closely with in that particular job. And they started to get quite a strong friendship. Greg's never had very many relationships. I was his first girlfriend, hence first, everything essentially. So he didn't have the experience of, understanding, the signals that women give off when they like you, when it gets beyond a friendship signal. And I could start to see that, and I was concerned and brought that up. And of course, he thought that I just wanted him to stop the friendship, he didn't see that those signals were a problem. He just thought that I wanted to stop the friendship and that would make him unhappy. And that wasn't the case at all. I wanted him to become more aware of what was happening. And so we had a really rough patch. There was lots of arguments, lots of, not, dealing with it well. And we had other stresses at the time as well. We had invested around that time, we had invested a significant amount of money into a business. It was 6 figures into a business that shortly thereafter, we lost the business folded, and we lost the entire 6 figures in a matter of 9 months. And so there was a lot of stress compounding that. And it really took us a while. I remember Christmas Eve, I remember going in, and I thought we were supposed to have Christmas with his family, and I just couldn't face it. I couldn't put the face on and go and have Christmas with the family. And I went, that's it. I said to him, look, I'm going for a drive. And he said, where are you going to? And we lived in Sydney at the time. And I said, well, I haven't seen the 12 Apostles, so I'm going there, which is, down the bottom of Victoria.
As you do.
Well, that's a heck of a drive. And I said, yeah, well, it'll be fine. So I literally, within half an hour, packed a bag and headed off. I had no accommodation booked. I had nothing organized, but I needed to clear my head. I needed to give myself space to figure out, whether I had the guts in me to fight for the relationship still. And so I think I made it to, Albury Wodonga the first night, and then, Melbourne, and crashed on somebody's couch, a friend of mine's couch, the night after that. And then down to the 12 Apostles. And I woke up the next morning at the 12 Apostles, and I realized, I think it was, by this stage, it might be a few days. I think it was New Year's Eve. That's right. So I'd been gone for a couple of days, and I realized it was New Year's Eve, and I went, do you know what? I'm not sure that I want to start the new year on my own. I'm not sure that I want to create an omen, so to speak, of that for the year ahead. So I literally got up early that morning and drove straight home, which I think took me 13 hours driving, and drove straight home to make sure that I saw the new year in with my husband. And I think to some degree that was my commitment. That was me getting back to committing that, okay, I want to fight for this. I had to give myself space to figure that out.
Love that.
And then work out, I do want to fight for this. So I really want to make that effort. So it still wasn't easy. There was lots of conversations.
But
and then
sorry, Julie, to interrupt. What jumps out is that you listened to yourself enough to give yourself what you needed, and you knew that you needed space. And you actually gave that to yourself and took yourself away. And in that, you were then able to process, well, what do I really want? Because that's a question that I ask couples. What do you want? And then what are you willing to do to get what you want? What do I want?
I had asked Greg to leave.
Yeah.
I had asked Greg to leave in that lead up a number of times.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm not leaving, you know.
Yeah.
We're a partnership. I'm not leaving.
Yes.
And so that, you know, was quite challenging. Because I felt that the behavior wasn't quite in alignment with everything. But I also understood, and this is Greg and I are very different. I remember when we first you know, got married, before we got married, we had marriage counseling. We had to, with our particular religion, that we were required to have some marriage counseling before we got married. And our counselor had looked at us, you know, you two, your personality profiles are completely opposite. You have nothing in common. Why are you getting married, you know? And we looked at each other and we looked at him and said, because we love each other, you know, why else would you get married? But it took me about a good 10 years to understand and respect Greg's differences, and more importantly, not try and change him to be him more like me.
Love it. Yeah.
Because I think I wanted him to, like, if we went somewhere or we saw a funny movie and I was laughing hilarious, I wanted him to laugh hilariously as well, you know, but that's not who he is. He'll sit there and go, it's all right, you know, kind of thing. And I'm like, that's hilarious, you know, tears running down your face, kind of thing. And he's just not that type of person.
No.
And it took me a long time to fully appreciate and respect him for who he is and not try and change him.
Yes.
You know, and that's the thing that women tend to do a lot.
Yep.
We want to fix men to be more like us. And
I love
actually
that.
try and seek that.
Yeah.
You know, they
so
just
for you, it's accepting him exactly the way he is. But would it be fair to say that you're quite an extrovert and he's an introvert?
Very much.
So yes.
Yeah. Well, you've met Greg, so you can attest to that as well.
I have, absolutely. But I think when we have pain, it's because we want our reality to be different, or we want our partner to be different. You know the work of Byron Katie. You know, it's about loving what is. And so it's loving him exactly as he is. So anybody listening to this, Google the work of Byron Katie. Her work is brilliant. I've done many judging over worksheets because it's when you want somebody to be different. Yeah. And the only one we can work on is
when you want something to be different, that is the cause of suffering. Byron Katie talks about if you're focused on the past or the present, about the past or the future, you are in suffering.
Yes.
Right? If you focus on the now, you will be in pain-free, more pain-free. But you've got to then focus on, you know, clearing the thoughts, the story in your head.
Yes.
Brené Brown talks about this a lot as well in her book Rising Strong, which is a great book, and I had some massive epiphanies from that book as well. Byron Katie's brilliant, but Brené Brown words it as to what she asks you in Rising Strong. What are the story that you're telling in your head about this situation?
Yes.
And if you then have, and I used this in my relationship with Greg after I read that book, and I would say, if I was finding myself upset or a bit angry at him, instead of just going spit, 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 scratch at him, you know, I would approach it with, honey, this is the story I'm telling in my head about what's going on at the moment. Can you clarify if I'm on the right track or not?
Love it.
And then instead of accusing him, I'm coming from a place of, this is what's going on in my head.
Yes.
You know, I just need to clarify.
Yes.
Am I, you know, justified in thinking this or not?
Yes.
You know, and then he's not being attacked. It's a conversation as opposed to an argument, you know.
I love that. You're actually, because I know for me in the past, for a fair bit of my marriage, particularly as it wasn't doing well, I took it all underground and I kept it all in. And so the resentment would build instead of actually speaking it out, the stories, not attaching to them. And a lot of it, as you know, is our past stuff, our original family, and, you know, that sort of locks in. So by you are actually voicing it. This is the story I've got in my head. I'm not going to make an assumption about it. I'm just going to speak it out. And I love that, because you haven't got any energy, any sort of, you're not attacking, you're not criticizing. It just is what it is. This is what's going on for me. And it comes back to what you were talking about earlier, communication and respect.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a few things in the time frame. Again, this comes back to personal development, and you talked about this at the beginning. You can't fix somebody else. It's their choice to fix themselves or not. But by changing, and my psychiatrist way back in the day gave me an analogy that worked really well for me. He said, relationships are like ping pong. If you hit the ball really hard, expect it to come back hard at you,
I like that.
Oh, okay. If you lob it and you're soft about it, so it's a nice soft, it will probably come back softer. And okay, so the way I respond, will have a direct impact. And so I learned that, when I was 21. So I've learned and kept that analogy going. But there's been those other layering of personal development as it goes. So the Byron Katie stuff for sure, the Brene Brown stuff, Gay Hendricks in his book, The Big Leap, which I absolutely love. I've read that book 3 times, and the third time it was like, oh, it really hit me, And the thing that he said was, when 2 people argue, they're just racing for victimhood status. And I went, oh, I'll repeat it. When 2 people argue, they're racing for victimhood status. In other words, if you're both arguing, you're both trying to be the victim here, to be poor me, woe is me. I want to be the winner because I'm the one that's most hurt. And I've never wanted to be called a victim in my life. I've had lots of trauma in my life, as you know. We've talked about that in our many conversations over the time. But I've never wanted to be labeled or label myself by that. So for me, I've always wanted to, how can I do better? How can I rise above this? And so, Greg and I made 2 promises to each other when we got married at the very start of our marriage. And the first one was, we'd never go to bed on an argument. And there have been times where I've had to hit him with a pillow to wake him up because he has drifted off. Not intentionally, he's just tired. But we were young, and I wasn't quite as balanced as I am now. So the old pillow over the head to wake him up so we can continue getting through it. And the second thing is that we would never should on each other. The word should is a really subversive word in a relationship. You should do this. You're putting judgment, expectation, and a whole range of emotions into that word. And in reality, you could change it for shitting on somebody, because that's what you're doing. You're just putting a whole load of crap on top of somebody, and that's just not fair to anyone.
I love that, because if somebody's listening to this and there's disconnect, they're blaming each other, and because as you would know, you fall in and out of love constantly, and it's keeping that connection, it's that flow. So by not going to sleep, because you take it into dream time and that sits in your body and you wake up with it, and also the you should that I think would be really, really helpful. So we're just about out of time. I love this. You have given so many nuggets of gold. And if somebody's listening to this and they're feeling really alone, they're struggling, they're not sure the next step, it's all feeling a bit overwhelming, what would you say to them?
Yeah, look, a really great question. I give them a couple of pieces of advice. First thing is go and get some help, because sometimes you just can't see the forest for the trees yourself, and you need a safe space for you to work through your stuff.
Love it.
Don't put the full responsibility on the other person to change. Take responsibility for your part. And in fact, when you do change, it actually, the bonus of changing yourself
Yes.
because you change, it actually makes other people adjust themselves to you
Yes.
without you doing that. And it's not the
Lovely.
reason you should do it. You should do it to grow as a better human being.
Yes.
But the bonus of it is that other people will change their responses, like the ping pong. When
Yes.
you stop lobbing things or
Yes.
fastballing things at them, then they have to adjust their response to that.
Love it.
And so by changing yourself, that's why that saying is, if you change yourself, you'll change the world, right? If you change yourself, it will have massive impacts on your relationship in a positive way most of the time. It can't help but not. So first thing, get help.
Yes.
Have some really good friends. Friends are really important to
Yes.
uplift and support you.
Yes.
And if your friends are telling you judgment things around your relationship, they're not really serving you. So choose your friends wisely or get new ones, one or the other. And go back into, why did you love that person to start with?
Yeah.
And what is it in that relationship that you really valued? And
I love
focus
this.
on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've got so many words of wisdom. So yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure, honey.
Coming back to your working life, because you love learning and growing, and you've done that in your career, and you're extremely successful. If people are listening to you and going, "Oh, I like the sound of her," how would they get hold of you? How would they contact you?
Yeah, look, go to my website, juliemason.com.au is probably the first part to start with.
Yep.
Reach out to me on social networks if you like. I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably, one of the predominant ones. So just search for Julie Mason.
Yes.
I am a LinkedIn trainer. I help people generate leads and sales on LinkedIn easily and elegantly. That's kind of what I do.
Yes.
But in terms, I'm also a business coach. I help people, as you've experienced.
I have
coaching, and my coaching is kind of, I have a great ability to not only see the overall picture, but I also see what's holding you back, yourself, from achieving your goals. So, yeah.
And
and
I'll add to that, in working with you, Julie. I mean, it was initial, but it was for a year I worked with you, and I loved how it was having accountability, but you could see who I could grow into, and you held that space for me. So you're so much more than a business coach. I think it's a coach of your whole life, actually. It really is. But I mean, our work is a big part, but we've all got to have the other parts working well as well to be great in business. And I think that's the platform that you supported me in, is the whole overall. So yeah, thank you. So anybody listening and likes the sound of you, get hold of you. Yeah. So anyway, on that note, we're going to have to finish. So if any of you, if this is the first time that you've connected with me, powerofchange.com.au, you can find everything about the podcast, the interview with Julie, the show notes will be on there. So I think that's about it. I could keep talking to you all day, Julie. I love it. Love it. So anyway,
thank you so much for having me, Helen. It's been a joy.
Yeah, it's I love your nuggets of gold. And we all need support, all of us. We're all in this together. We're not separate. And what you think you're doing alone, you aren't. We're all going through this at varying degrees.
Absolutely.
The ebbs and flows of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, on that note, I'll see you all next time on the Empowered Marriage Podcast. See ya.